So the next exercise I'm going to do, the sixth in the series, is actually a two-parter. The first part is about stretching and opening up the spine, pretty much from the lumbar spine up to the thoracic spine. Okay. So both sections of those. The second part actually opens up the pelvis and the lumbar spine. So both are important for good natural movement, as well as maintaining the mobility, so as not to hurt your back during certain exercises within the internal martial arts. Okay. So one thing, there's a lot of twisting and stuff in particularly Bagua, and when that is done, and is done properly with the proper strength and mobility, there's no risk of injury. But a lot of times what happens is, since people lack mobility in the thoracic spine or the pelvis, that transfers twisting over into the lumbar spine, which in a sense needs to make up for the lack of that motion and places where it's supposed to have it. When that's the case, what typically will occur is injury in the lumbar spine, because just the way that the lumbar spine is developed, it's not meant to have an excessive amount of rotation and torque, and which would lead to shearing of the lumbar discs. So by this fashion, what we want to focus on is making sure that we are able to provide the necessary mobility in the proper areas. And if I didn't clarify mobility is actually the ability to maintain strength through a natural but greater range of motion. So that's kind of an important aspect. And when mobility is not maintained, it generally leads to restricted movement and the possibility of injury in the near or distant future. Okay. So here's the movement. So there's the movement for you. Now, with that movement, it's important to understand that it is necessary to have a proper hip hinge. So here's what a hip hinge is. A hip hinge is where I focus on hinging at my hips, as opposed to hinging at my low back, my lumbar spine. Okay? So common thing that you see in most people is when they go to reach down for stuff, is they bend here at the lumbar spine, a little bit into the lower thoracic spine. We call that the thoracolumbar junction. Thoracolumbar junction is the junction point as the thoracic spine transitions into the lumbar spine. Any time where you have a transitional area of the spine, it does tend to be a little bit weaker, because the segments, the vertebrae, are essentially in transition. So they're very similar to the ones above it and a little bit to below it. This does tend to lead to a little bit of weakness. So what I commonly say is, chiropractor working in with the population is that these segments tend to become very injury prone, especially when people don't maintain good structure and function. So as you're doing the hip hinge, what you want to focus on is maintaining good strength, maintaining natural position with the lumbar spine, so it's natural, it's neutral. Okay? That curve is there for a reason. It's meant to be there. It's a very strong curve. Now, what you commonly see in the Chinese internal martial arts, particularly in Tai Chi Chuan, is that people will round the lumbar spine. Well, they'll reverse the lordotic curvature. So you end up, and they do this by tucking the hips. So you commonly see this tuck, and this rotation of tuck takes that curve out. When you take that curve out, what happens is it actually places a great deal of pressure on the end plates of the vertebral bodies, and it also weakens and causes issues with the ligamentum flavum, which is a very long ligament inside the spinal canal. When you change all this stuff and you don't allow for the natural structure and function of these tissues and structures, they will cause weakness, possibly prone to injury. And you also another thing is you also deactivate the erector spinae, the paraspinal muscles that will run along the spine, that are actually meant to maintain balance and maintain the strength of the spine. Okay, so it's important to understand why this movement is so necessary for the back. Okay, so here's what I want you to focus on to get this movement is focusing on that hip hinge. Okay, now I'm going to maintain balance here in my pelvis. So you may want to try this as a basic exercise. Find what is pelvic neutral for you. Okay? So you'll thrust your hips forward, you'll thrust your hips back, forward, and back. I know it looks a little awkward, okay? But it's necessary to kind of find that balance in between them. Once you do find that balance, you're going to maintain that balance the entire time. So what I want you to do is you can put your hands on your hips right at that crease spot, okay? The qua in Chinese. Okay? And you're gonna push your pelvis back as you maintain your spine. It is almost as if your spine is completely rigid, that it could not bend up on itself, okay? Now the other helpful tip is to imagine that I have a bar running from here to here through my hips, and as I do that, it's able to maintain that movement. So I'm just kind of going back and forth on that movement. Some of my daughter's toy figurines, as they bend and stuff like that, have a similar idea that you can bend them, and they only bend at that part because they're completely rigid in that torso area. So it's a very similar idea. Now, for the necessary movement, so I'm going to show this close up. So you're going to interlace your fingers together. You'll raise up your arms. Now, when you rotate, what I want you to focus on is maintaining your pelvis right in the same spot. Do not twist. Okay, a lot of times what I see is this action here. People really twist with that movement. Okay, so your arms are going to be up, and I just want you to turn the shoulders. So you're not going to get very far, especially if you're really lacking mobility in that area. You're going to keep your pelvis facing forward the entire time, and you're going to just twist. Okay, but typically you just twist first to the left, then to the right. Okay, the next movement is going to open up to the side. So now most people will try to just do that, and they'll thrust their hip to the opposite direction. What I want you to focus on is just the shoulders again. Okay, so I'm just moving the shoulders, and instead of focusing on bending to the other side, I want you to think about opening this side. Okay, we're opening this side, going in this direction. So I go this way, I open up that side, and I go the other way, I open up that side. Okay? The next part of the movement is going back. So we go back to go forward. I extend back, and extend back. You go as far as you're able to do to maintain balance so you don't fall down. And then that's when I can go forward. So, just like I talked about prior, okay, you want to focus on that hip hinge as you go down. Now, at a certain point, you're gonna disengage the hip hinge. It's safe to do so at that point, but you need to maintain the hip hinge to at least 90 degrees to the ground. Now, what you can do at this point is you can just kind of rock a little side to side, just to kind of open up the hamstrings a bit more on each side. Now, from there, I'm going to reverse the movement. I'm going to come up. And now from here, I'm going to add the part that focuses on opening up and stretching the pelvis a bit more, okay? So I want you to focus. Just a good deep lunge, nice, very nice stretch. But you're going to come up. I'm going to circle first to the right, then to the left. As I begin to rise up, I'm going to take a step out with my right foot, and then twist off to the right. I'm going to rotate back the opposite direction, twist off to the left, and step forward with the left. You can then repeat this sequence several times to help open up your thoracic, your lumbar, and your pelvic spine, portions of your spine. Okay? So let me show you the movement again before we finish. And that is the movement for this exercise.